Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Healer and Hope Giver podcast. I'm Kim, and I'm so glad that you're here today. Now, if this is your first time listening, welcome. You haven't missed anything you need in order to jump into today's conversation. Every episode here is meant to stand on its own. But if you have been listening, you know that the last year of my life has been one long, messy, holy invitation to slow down and let God do surgery on my schedule, my heart, my identity, and honestly, everything. And today, we're going to talk about something I think every one of us wrestles with, whether we've said it out loud or not. These moments when we want answers from God, but instead, He gives us Himself. And listen, I don't know about you, but sometimes I don't want presents. I want a color-coded PDF labeled, "Here's what God is doing," page 1 of 12. But that's not how He works. That's not who He is, and that's not how we grow. So today, we're going to talk about what it looks like to trust God, not because He explained Himself, but because He showed up. Now, I'm going to share some pieces of my story today, pieces from my childhood, from early adulthood, from my marriage, and from an 8-year infertility journey that shaped my faith more than any sermon ever could. But here's the thing these stories have in common. At every stage, I wanted answers, clear ones, preferably with bullet points. And instead, God gave me identity. He gave me presence. He gave me a heart that could hold other people's pain and joy. And eventually, God gave me miracles. And just rarely in the order that I requested. This episode is not about getting the outcomes we want. It's about becoming the person God knows we can be. The person He's been shaping us into long before we understood what He was doing. So wherever you are today, in waiting, in heartbreak, in transition, in unanswered prayers, take a breath with me. You're not alone. You're not behind, and you're not being ignored by God. You are being formed. All right, let's take a step into this together. Let me take you back to where some of this began. Before I take you into adulthood, into asking God for answers, into fertility, into identity and surrender, I need to take you back for a moment. Not because I want to rehash old wounds and definitely not to point the finger at anyone, but because our earliest environments teach us things long before we understand what we're learning. I grew up in a home with a lot of big emotions, a lot of love, truly, but also a lot of hurt, a lot of transitions, and moments that no one knew how to navigate because everyone was grieving something. And I want to be really clear about this. I believe my parents did the very best they could with what they had. That's not a line, that's truly my heart. Life hit our family hard, and we all coped in the only ways that we knew how. But here's what that meant for me. Early on, I learned to read a room like a weather radar. I could sense tension before anyone spoke. I could feel sadness even when it wasn't mine. And I learned instinctively that if I could just keep the peace, maybe things wouldn't fall apart. And so I became the helper, the harmonizer, the peacemaker, the one who made sure everyone else was okay, even if I wasn't. If someone was frustrated, I softened. If someone was hurting, I stepped up. If someone needed support, I offered it quietly, consistently, without needing to be asked. And honestly, I didn't even realize this was unusual until I became an adult. Some people, like one of my sisters, can ask for help at the drop of a hat. She needs something, she'll text, she'll call, she'll group message all of us, and suddenly we're elbow deep in a family sweatshop making freezer meals for her postpartum season. It was chaotic and fun and deeply my family. Big laughter, big love, big volume, 5 conversations going at once, and whoever is the loudest wins. But here's the thing. She asked for what she needed. Naturally, easily, confidently. Me, I grew up so used to being the helper that I never learned how to ask for help without feeling like I was failing at something. And I carried that into adulthood and into my faith without even realizing it. And there's something else I want to add here because it shaped me in ways I'm still unraveling. After my dad passed away, I was sitting with my therapist and she asked me, "Kim, how are you doing?" And without missing a beat, I listed everybody else's feelings, my siblings, my stepmom, my kids, the extended family, everyone else's emotional temperature before I ever said one word about my own. She gently stopped me and said, "I didn't ask about them, I asked about you." And I remember thinking, I don't even know how to answer that. Because somewhere along the way, I learned to disappear into caretaking, into comforting, and into steadying other people's hearts before I ever check in on my own. This is the space where episode 2 lives, in the space between wanting answers, not knowing how to ask for help, and learning that God wasn't asking me to be strong, He was asking me to be honest. And that brings us to the next part of my story, the part where God began to gently dismantle all the ways I tried to carry my world alone. As I got older, I didn't realize that my childhood keep the peace training had quietly grown into something else. This deeply ingrained belief that needing help made me a burden. Now, do I believe that about other people? Absolutely not. I can talk someone off the ledge all day long, but somewhere deep inside, I believed that for myself. And this is where my adulthood gets really honest. When life got heavy, when grief hit, when responsibilities piled up, when things felt unmanageable, I didn't know how to raise my hand. Not with my family, not with my friends, and not even with God. I would just keep going, keep juggling, keep supporting everyone else, keep showing up like nothing fazed me. But that doesn't work forever, and eventually it showed. I mentioned before that one of my sisters is naturally great at asking for help. It's a beautiful thing. If she needs something, she calls. If she's overwhelmed, she says so. If she needs meals in her freezer after having a baby, she will assemble the troops. And by troops, I mean me, another sibling, my stepmom, and any cousin or family within a 10-mile radius. We all ended up in her kitchen one day, turning it into what we lovingly and accurately called a family sweatshop. There were pots boiling, ovens preheating, cutting boards everywhere. Someone was elbow deep in ricotta for stuffed shells. Someone else was mixing soup in a giant stock pot like they were stirring a witch's cauldron. Meanwhile, several were having totally different conversations, practically yelling over the sound of foil tearing and timers going off. It was chaotic. It was loud. It was us. It was perfect. The entire reason it happened is because she asked for what she needed. And meanwhile, if I needed freezer meals, I would have been in my kitchen alone with a can of soup thinking, well, I made this choice. I'll figure it out. Not because I don't have people who love me, and not because I'm not supported, but because asking for help feels like stepping off a cliff into the unknown. I touched on this earlier too, but I want to revisit it because it marked me. When my dad passed away, I sat with my therapist, and she asked how I was doing. My instinct was to talk about everyone else, like my own grief wasn't even in the room. Like my emotions didn't have permission to exist until I addressed everyone else's first. And she stopped me gently but directly. "Kim, I didn't ask how they're doing. I asked how you are doing." And I froze. Not because I didn't have emotions, but because I didn't know how to access them for myself. I didn't know how to make space for them. I didn't know how to need anything because needing felt unsafe, like an inconvenience, like something I had to earn. This is where faith gets real because I didn't just carry this pattern in my relationships, I carried it into my prayer life. I would pray for God to help my kids, my husband, my siblings, my friends, people at church, and even strangers, long before I ever whispered, "Lord, I need you." And it wasn't intentional, it was instinctual. But here's the thing about God. He doesn't just answer the prayers that we pray, He answers the ones that we avoid. And slowly, gently, lovingly, He began showing me that what I called strength was actually self-protection. And what I called being fine was actually fear of being too much. He wasn't asking me to be strong, He was asking me to be honest. He wasn't waiting for the perfect request, He was waiting for the real one. And this right here is where He began a major heart renovation. Because in the months that followed, God didn't hand me instructions or tidy answers. He handed me something much more disruptive and much more healing. He handed me an identity. And that's where we're headed next. Somewhere in the middle of the helping, the holding, the not asking for help, the grief, the exhaustion, the unanswered questions, I found myself in a study called Living Fearless by Jamie Winship. Now, I didn't go into this lightheartedly. This wasn't a fill-in-the-blank devotional that you keep on your nightstand. This was a full-day, gut-level, God-examine my entire identity kind of process. And I didn't do it alone. Kevin, my pastor and dear friend, walked through the study at the same time. And we each did the work separately, but somehow we were still walking this road side by side. We didn't coordinate it that way, but God did, because He knew that what He was about to say would change me, and He surrounded me with someone who knew how to hold that moment with both strength and gentleness. Living Fearless asks you to sit with God and let Him reveal the identity that He placed on you from the beginning. The identity that existed before trauma, before fear, before coping, before performance, before theology could get complicated, and before life got loud. It asks you to strip away everything false that you've carried, every role that you think defined you, and every expectation you've internalized, every voice that shaped you, even the loving ones. And it asks, who were you before the world told you who to be? And that question, it shook me, because for most of my life, I've been the harmonizer, the helper, the peacemaker, the one who could be counted on, the quiet, steady presence, the one who fills the gaps and keeps things moving for everyone else. But those aren't identities. Those are survival strategies. Beautiful ones, yes, but not the name that God gave me. As I sat with God, eyes closed, heart open, a mix of fear and curiosity in my chest, I asked Him, "Who did you create me to be?" And the answer came so quickly and so clearly that I actually questioned if I heard Him right. He said, "You are a healer and hope giver." And I remember thinking, well, what now? A healer? A hope giver? Me, the girl who avoids asking for help? Me, the one who thinks that my needs are inconvenient? Me, the one who carries everyone else's emotions like they're fragile heirlooms? But the longer I sat in His presence, the more it resonated in that deep inner space where truth settles. It didn't feel like a compliment. It didn't feel like a job assignment. It felt like remembering, like something in me whispered, yes, that's who I've always been. Now, let me be very honest. When God tells you who you are, everything changes and nothing changes at the same time. You still wake up in the same house. You still face the same responsibilities. You still carry the same grief. You still navigate the same weaknesses, but something shifts internally. You stop living from fear and you stop striving for proof. You stop trying to earn love by absorbing everyone's emotions, and you begin to live from an identity instead of insecurity. And I didn't realize until that day just how much of my faith had been built around asking God for answers instead of receiving God as my anchor. He didn't tell me how my shoulder would heal, or how I would walk through a grief season, or how our family would move forward, or how the future would unfold. He told me who I am, because answers are temporary, but identity is eternal. Identity is what steadies you when life refuses to make sense. Identity is what keeps you grounded when prayers go unanswered. Identity is what allows you to show up fully, not as the harmonizer trying to keep peace, but as the woman that God named you to be. Now, I have to say this. Not everyone in your life is meant to hold your identity with you. Some people will misunderstand it, and some will reduce it. Some will try to reshape it. Some will be intimidated by it. But God knew I needed someone gentle, honest, spiritually grounded, and not afraid to call me out. And Kevin is one of the few people who can lovingly do that and somehow make me grateful for it. We talked about the study afterwards, the weight of it, the beauty of it, the way identity has to be lived and not memorized. And I walked away from that day knowing that God had named something in me that I had been living my entire life without recognizing it. Not because I'm extraordinary, but because God is intentional. He wastes nothing, not even old wounds, not even childhood patterns, and not even unanswered questions. And that brings me to one of the defining seasons of my adult life, a season where I begged God for clarity, for direction, for answers, for breakthrough, and instead, He drew me into surrender. The next part of my story is tender. It's long, it's layered, and it changed me. Let's step into it together. Infertility is a long road, an unpredictable, humbling, hope-stretching, soul-shaping road. And before I tell you the miraculous ending, I need to honor the winding path that it really was. Because our story didn't unfold in a straight line. It unfolded in plot twists, the kind only God could write. After 8 years of trying, praying, waiting, and being medically humbled, we created our adoption profile. You sit in rooms making decisions about things that you never imagined choosing. Race, age, level of openness, possible medical conditions. You're creating a snapshot of your family, hoping a mother will look at it and say, "Yes, I choose them." And then we got the call, a baby girl. We rushed to the hospital, nervous and excited and terrified in all the ways hopeful parents are. But as we sat there, waiting, ready, hearing the baby being born through the chimes on the loudspeaker, and the mother changed her mind. And let me say this with full compassion. She had every right to do that. I honor that choice, and it was the right choice for her. But the ache of that moment, the sound and feeling of hope deflating in a quiet hospital waiting room, that stays with you. It would be another 2 months before our phone rang again. There's a baby boy. And just like that, matter of fact, like they were offering us a table at a restaurant, we rushed to the hospital again. This time, no expectations, no assumptions, just prayer and shaky hope. And then we were placed in what can only be described as the nursery storage closet. Diapers stacked to the ceiling, formula samples everywhere, and 2 brand new, terrified humans trying to figure out bottle feeding for the first time. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't Pinterest worthy, but it was holy. We fed him the first bottle of his entire life, and as we're standing there in this tiny closet, holding this tiny baby wrapped in this gigantic moment, John looks over at me and says, "Babe, are you okay? You look green." And listen, when your husband tells you that you're literally turning a shade found on a cartoon frog, that's a moment. He didn't say it to be funny. He said it because he recognized something unfamiliar. And in that second, he thought, "Oh no, she's pregnant." The next 48 hours were a blur of feeding, paperwork, joy, disbelief, and very little sleep. And then shortly after bringing baby James home, we got confirmation. I was pregnant, and not just barely pregnant, not maybe this will stick and we'll see. Nope, 12 weeks along. I had been pregnant the entire time unknowingly while we were finalizing the adoption of our son. So let me summarize what the doctor said was impossible. My son was 1 week old. I was 3 months pregnant. Our boys would be 6 months apart. To this day, people hear their birth years and look at me like I've failed basic math. I get the same question every time. Are you sure you have their birthdays right? And I always want to answer, no, Brenda, I accidentally raised siblings for 15 years under the wrong calendar. Of course I'm sure. One son came to us through adoption, a completely sacrificial act of love from a courageous biological mother, and the other came to us through a miracle pregnancy that defined years of medical charts and specialists, and together they became the fulfillment of the deepest desire in my heart. Not because I earned it, and not because I did everything right, but because God was writing a story that was bigger than my striving. Years later, when I walked through the Living Fearless identity work and God spoke the words, "You are a healer and hope giver," suddenly the 8-year journey made sense. I had been forming that identity in me the entire time, through every doctor's appointment, through every disappointment, through every surrender, through adoption, through pregnancy, through holding 2 babies 6 months apart, through learning that love doesn't divide, it multiplies. God wasn't late. He wasn't punishing me. He wasn't ignoring me. He was shaping me into the woman he always knew that I was. A healer, a hope giver, a mother twice over to 2 miraculous and unforgettable boys. If there's one thing I've learned through infertility, medical emergencies, unexpected miracles, and losing my dad, it's this. God doesn't always give us answers when we demand them, but He always gives us Himself when we need Him. And honestly, that's not what I wanted for a long time. I wanted clarity. I wanted timelines. I wanted the why behind every disappointment and every delay. I wanted to know what God was doing so I could feel safe. And He said, "No, daughter, you will feel safe because I am with you, not because you understand the plan." I think back to those 8 years of infertility, the nights I sat on the bathroom floor crying because another test was negative, the phone calls I would get where the doctor essentially told me that my body was too complicated, the day the specialist literally told me he was firing me as a patient because of my diabetes. And in those moments, I wanted answers. I wanted solutions. I wanted a guarantee. But what I received was presence. Not the presence that fixes everything immediately, but the presence that holds you so you don't fall apart. When we say, "Lord, I need you more than answers," it's not poetic. It is learned. It is lived. It is wrestled into our bones through seasons we never asked for. And sometimes the quiet lesson underneath all the noise is this: you don't need to see the path when you're held by the one who built it. I couldn't see that in real time. I only saw the loss, the delay, the heartbreak, the unanswered prayers, the moments that felt like failure, the confusion, the ache of being a human in a broken world. But God was building something in me long before I ever said yes to a microphone or a podcast or sharing my heart publicly. He was forming healing in me so He could form healing through me. He was giving me hope so that I could give it away one day. He was telling a story with my life that I didn't even know I was living yet. When my dad entered hospice, there weren't any answers left. There were only moments. moments of tenderness, laughter that bubbled through tears, honoring my stepmother for her sacrificial care, listening to stories from his best friend, praying as a family, holding his hand, watching his faith carry him home, and these moments became holy ground. And again, I wasn't given answers. I wasn't told why this was happening, or why it had to be this way, or why right after my surgery, or why right before another round of medical questions. But God didn't give me the answers. He gave me access to peace, access to presence, access to stillness, access to the kind of nearness I may have missed if my life had been busy and full of rushing ahead. God slowed me down so I could stand beside my dad as he left this world and entered eternity. But that wasn't an answer. It was a gift. I look now and I see the girl who struggled to ask for help, the woman who carried everyone else's feelings first, the mom who learned to love in two miraculous ways, and the daughter who watched her father cross into heaven. That woman has been shaped, chiseled, and tenderly formed by a God who knew exactly what he was doing. And now when life hits hard, and goodness, it sure does, I don't ask for answers first, I ask for him, the one who steadies me, the one who holds me, the one who whispers, I'm here, breathe, you're not alone. And this is where episode 2 lands its heartbeat, because if you hear nothing else today, hear this. You do not need all the answers to live a life filled with hope. You just need a God who walks with you in the unanswered places. And that is what he does, over and over again. So let's bring all of this home. Because if all we do is listen to my stories, we miss the bigger invitation that God is offering you right now. And friend, I want you to hear this in the gentlest way possible. You are allowed to stop demanding answers and start receiving presence. Life will give you 1,000 reasons to ask why, and God does not answer a single one of the why questions in the way that you expect. But he will always give you himself. And sometimes that's the only answer that heals anything at all. We're so good at pushing through, aren't we? And pretending we're fine and downplaying what hurts, at avoiding what would require us to stop and feel. But healing begins when we let ourselves be human. Not perfect, not strong, not impressive, not shiny for the world, just human. Broken and beautiful in the same breath. And if you've been waiting for permission to slow down, to breathe, to cry, to rest, to stop being the responsible one for a minute, sweet friend, you have it right here, right now. Not where you should be, not where others expect you to be, not where you're pretending to be, just right here where you are. God does his best work in honesty. And when I was in the middle of fertility, I wasn't praying pretty prayers. I wasn't journaling poetic scriptures. I wasn't lifting my hands in the car with worship music playing. I was saying, Lord, what are you doing? And why does this hurt so much? And why do I feel forgotten? And God wasn't offended. He met me there. He didn't give me answers, but he gave me himself. And looking back, I think that was the point all along. Listen, we've got to talk about emotional backpacks because most of us are walking around carrying all of our stuff, other people's stuff, and the imaginary stuff that we think we're responsible for. And then we wonder why we're exhausted by 10 a.m. I spent my entire life carrying everyone else first, their emotions, their needs, their fears, their comfort. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that I had my own heart that needed tending. If that's you, you're not broken. You're just tired. And it's time to set a few things down. God is not calling you to be the hero in every room. You can love deeply and still have boundaries. You can care beautifully and still not carry everything. Healer and hope giver does not mean doormat and emotional pretzel. Ask me how I know. This is huge. We spend so much of our lives letting other people name us. Too much, not enough, difficult, quiet, sensitive, strong one, fixer, peacemaker, problem solver, the one who holds it all together. And we live those names like they're our birthright, but they're not. They're survival skills. In the Living Fearless Identity Study, when God spoke the words healer and hope giver over me, it wasn't an upgrade. It was more of a homecoming. It was the truest thing he could have ever spoken into my spirit. And friend, what God says about you is always more true than anything the world has ever told you. So ask him, truly ask him, Lord, who do you say that I am? And listen, not with pressure, not with fear of getting it wrong, but with openness. He wants to tell you. This is where we wrap our entire episode around this one central truth. God doesn't always change our circumstances immediately, but he will transform us within them. Infertility transformed me. Loss transformed me. Medical crisis transformed me. Motherhood transformed me. Identity work transformed me. And slowing down painfully, reluctantly, and necessarily transformed me. Not instantly, not neatly, not Instagram ready, but deeply. You don't have to fix your life for God to move. You just have to surrender your pace long enough to notice his presence. And here's the last thing I want you to hear today. When you feel forgotten, you're held. When you feel delayed, you're being led. When you feel unanswered, you're being invited closer. When life feels painfully silent, God is not absent. He's whispering. You've just been asked to slow down so that you can finally hear him. And that is the heartbeat of episode 2. Thank you truly for spending this time with me today. If your story looks anything like mine, full of twists and delays, questions without answers, beautiful moments mixed right in with the hard ones, I hope today reminded you that you don't need perfect clarity to keep going. You just need a God who walks with you, and friend, you have one. If something in this episode spoke to you or made you feel a little less alone in your unanswered places, would you consider sharing it with a friend? You never know who might need a reminder that they're not forgotten. And your willingness to invite someone in really helps this little podcast to grow. And listen, if you've chosen to financially support the show, I want you to know how deeply grateful I am. It means the world that you would link arms with me in this work. You truly are a gift. If you'd like to stay connected or find more encouragement through your week, you can always come hang out with me over on social media. That's where I share real-time pieces of my healing and hope-giving journey. And until next time, may you feel God's nearness in the places that are still quiet. May your story remind you that you're not walking alone. And may hope rise in you even before the answers do. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.